Under the suit are Denise Doe and her mother Jane Doe. They are suing Delta Women's Clinic on Goodwood Blvd. The suit concerns a procedure done September 5th of this year. Now, we warn you, this story may be upsetting.
Didn't get to her until late that evening, around 4:30.
The lawsuit alleges that it was Labor Day weekend and that Jane was standing in Delta's waiting room as Dr. Eileen O'Neill began her daughter's abortion procedure.
She was in there good 15 minutes, and I heard her screaming. Another 20 minutes passed. She was still screaming.
Then, she says, the doctor came out.
She just told me that something went wrong and she couldn't get in her good. And she had tried and tried, and she didn't know what the problem was.
But Jane says nothing could prepare her for her next look at her daughter on the operating table.
And she was crying. Her hair was soaking wet. She was in a lot of pain. There was a huge jug beside her, and it was at least 3/4 full of blood. There was a clear hose full of blood, and there was blood on the floor.
Jane says the doctor told her she might want to take her daughter to a hospital. That was almost 4 months ago. Today, Denise is housebound. She alleges that first trip to the hospital that Saturday, doctors stitched her back up, saying the fetus was still alive, but an infection had already set in her uterus. Denise went back into the hospital with severe toxic shock syndrome and fell into a coma.
It took about 3 visits for it to really dawn on me that I was fixing to lose my daughter. She was fixing to die in there. And I was hopeless. It was hopeless feeling, you know, like at the end of your rope and no way to turn and nobody to help you but God.
Swollen with infection, Denise went through a septic abortion and an emergency hysterectomy. 2 months later, she was home from the hospital.
You can see it when it's going through, when the tape gets wet, and it starts itching on the sides. It goes through the bottom underneath the tape.
Today, Denise has to wear a colostomy bag to dispose of her body's waste. Jane says now she's trying to warn parents taking their daughters to Delta.
I tell them to kiss them and hug them and tell them how much they love them, because when they walk in that door, there's a good chance that they might not ever walk out again.
Julie Baxter, WAFB 9 News.
Coming up tonight at 10 o'clock, a shocking story of unsanitary conditions inside an abortion clinic here in Baton Rouge. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with a preview of tonight's story. Julie?
Well, George, we decided to look into these conditions after we covered a story last month regarding a lawsuit over an abortion that was attempted there at Delta. What we found when we went inside were conditions that the law would not allow at any other surgical outpatient type clinic. But in Louisiana, Delta Women's Clinic is not considered a surgical clinic, and state officials will tell us that they can do nothing about these conditions. Tonight, we'll take you inside that clinic. George?
Julie, both you and Paul Gates have been working on this story now for several days. What will Paul have for us tonight at 10?
Paul Gates is going to talk to us about the background of the 2 doctors that are operating there at Delta Women's Clinic, and we will have more information on those 2 people. One of the 2 of them flunked her residency. That's tonight at 10.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie Baxter.
And I'm Donna Britt. WAFB 9 News has uncovered exclusive details about the conditions inside the most controversial abortion clinic in Baton Rouge. Delta Women's Clinic is probably best known for the 1992 protests at its building on Bennington Avenue. But since then, the clinic has reopened at Goodwood and Terra Boulevards. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter went inside Delta to investigate sanitary conditions there. Her investigation was prompted by a lawsuit filed against Delta Women's Clinic last month, and Julie joins us now with these exclusive details. Julie?
Well, Donna, what we found inside this clinic does not look like anything you'd expect to find at a surgical clinic. But as we'll show you in our series this week, that's because Louisiana law does not consider an abortion clinic a surgical clinic, even though invasive surgeries are performed there. Our investigation started last month with a story from a Vermilion Parish woman who told us what happened to her at the clinic where no one's watching the doctors.
You can see it.
She calls herself Denise Doe in her lawsuit against Delta Women's Clinic. 4 months after an attempted abortion at Delta, Denise lives with a colostomy bag after complications from an infection she says began on the operating table at Delta. Even her story couldn't prepare us for what we saw inside this clinic. These dilators that ex-workers say are used inside women during abortion procedures are rusted, and yet those ex-workers say they are cleaned and reused over and over. These hoses are used during the procedures to carry blood and body fluids to a nearby container. Ex-workers say these hoses are cleaned in Clorox and reused. We found blood still on trays in operating rooms, blood on the floor. All this a day after procedures. After each procedure, women are told to sit in these recliners in this recovery room. Patients and ex-workers say the floors in this room are often stained with blood from previous patients. Outside, we found that the dumpster, where the discarded fetuses and medical waste is thrown away, is still rotted out on the bottom, even though a state check last spring ordered the clinic to repair the dumpster. But inside the clinic, no one's checking up on conditions here.
Regulation is a stumbling block. And we, as a country, as a philosophy, are not going to allow stumbling blocks in the way of a woman seeking an abortion.
Now, we tried repeatedly over the last month to get response from Delta as to this lawsuit, as well as these conditions that we found inside the clinic. They say that they have no comment.
Julie, how much business is Delta doing these days?
Well, Donna, they perform abortions usually about 3 days a week, and the conservative figure is about 15 women a day on each of those days that would get an abortion, but the number is often as high as 30 or 40 women on those days when the doctors come in and do abortion.
Thanks, Julie Baxter. Former Delta patients and ex-workers say abortions there cost from $315 to $1,750 for each abortion. 2 doctors operate there regularly.
WAFB 9 News reporter Paul Gates takes a closer look at those doctors' medical backgrounds.
Dr. A. James Whitmore performs abortions at Delta Clinic 2 days a week. He also runs this abortion clinic in New Orleans, which is owned by the same man who owns Delta. Dr. Whitmore, who refused to speak with us, is a licensed physician in Louisiana. In 1992, Whitmore's license was suspended and placed on probation for 3 years. The State Board of Medical Examiners says Dr. Whitmore was involved in incidents involving delivery of children, in which Dr. Whitmore's diagnoses and treatment were inappropriate, resulting in the birth of one child brain damaged and the death of another child. The board also found that Dr. Whitmore's management of patients on 2 occasions provided a reasonable basis for concern as to his professional competency. Whitmore completed the terms of his probation and is now in good standing with the Louisiana State Board. The other doctor performing abortions here at Delta Women's Clinic is Eileen White O'Neill. Dr. O'Neill received her Louisiana physician's license in 1996, but was then unable to complete an OB/GYN residency program at LSU Med School. In 1997, she was placed on probation at the school and required to repeat her 2nd year of residency. She was finally dismissed from the school in July of 1998. A source at the school told us O'Neill was dismissed because of her inadequacies. Dr. O'Neill is currently being sued. The lawsuit accuses her of gross negligence involving an abortion she performed at Delta Clinic. Dr. O'Neill has been unavailable for a comment. Paul Gates, WAFB 9 News.
Now, tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, we'll hear more from health officials and take a walk back through the history of the controversial Delta Women's Clinic. And I'm George Sells. As 1999 began, a Delta Women's Clinic patient told a personal horror story here on WAFB News. That sparked a 9 News investigation into conditions at the local abortion clinic. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now for the 2nd in our 3-part series, Who's Watching the Doctor? Julie?
Well, George, when we showed a ranking state health official the conditions that we found and caught on camera inside Delta Women's Clinic, he agreed that these conditions would not be tolerated legally at other outpatient surgery clinics. But health officials say abortion clinics are treated not like surgical clinics, but like doctors' offices. Offices where you're left wondering who's watching the doctor.
Last night, we took you inside Delta Women's Clinic, where a conservative estimate says 45 women a week undergo the surgical procedure of abortion.
These pictures depict unsanitary conditions. They need to be cleaned up. Unsanitary can always lead to health problems. That's about all I can tell you. We as a health department don't have any authority to regulate that.
The health department says federal courts struck down 2 Louisiana laws passed in 1978 that would have provided for wide-ranging regulations on the entire abortion procedure, from licensing to sanitary conditions.
Regulation is a stumbling block. And we, as a country, as a philosophy, are not going to allow stumbling blocks in the way of a woman seeking an abortion.
That, even though state law requires health officials to enforce the sanitary code anywhere the public's health is threatened. You read the law to say that it specifically exempts abortion clinics
Yes.
from having to be sanitary?
Yes. No, wait, not from having to be sanitary, from regulations.
Well, how do we know they're sanitary?
Well, we don't.
And Dr. Trachtman says a woman who signs her consent to an abortion at a clinic must trust the doctor that conditions are sanitary. The point of legalizing abortion was to take it out of back alleys, right? So women are not
Definitely
subject to health or life threats. What is the difference today if there's no one checking up on the conditions in these clinics?
Oh, well, I can tell you the difference today is that it's much safer. I mean, we don't have deaths. We don't have horribly sick women who got illegal abortions.
But when we told Dr. Trachtman about Denise Doe living with severe complications from an infection after an abortion attempt at Delta, he said the political controversy surrounding abortion has tied his hands.
There have been attempts to regulate abortion clinics, for want of a better term, in the past. It's like beating our heads against the wall. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It's not right, and I wish we could, but we can't.
Now again, Delta Women's Clinic has refused to comment on any of these conditions that we did find. Beyond the conditions, though, we did look at Louisiana law, which says that a clinic is required to have a woman's informed consent before they perform an abortion on her. The law considers that consent informed and voluntary only where the woman is not required to pay anything before a 24-hour period. Now, we're hearing from ex-patients and ex-workers of Delta Women's Clinic that, at least on occasion, the clinic is charging as much as $140 per patient on the first visit of that patient.
So that could be a whole other issue. Julie, what's next in your part of this investigation?
Well, tomorrow night we'll hear from state officials who say that they want to do something about a law that appears to be putting a clear health risk to these women who are going to these clinics.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Well, this isn't the first time that Delta Women's Clinic has grabbed the community's attention.
WAFB 9 News reporter Paul Gates takes us back through Delta's earlier days with the story of a clinic clouded with controversy.
The Delta Women's Clinic burst into the public consciousness in a big way in 1992 when Operation Rescue brought its aggressive methods of anti-abortion protest to Baton Rouge. In 1994, the building in which the clinic was located on Bennington Avenue was seized to pay a debt the owners owed to a local bank. One of the two owners is Leroy T. Brinkley. He and his partner had other outstanding debts, including a $337,000 fine imposed by the federal government. In this court document, the government says it produced evidence that dangerous drugs were handled in a most careless fashion by untrained personnel. There are no court records indicating the fine has been paid. Delta Clinic moved to its Goodwood location in 1994 and continued to attract controversy. 3 former employees lodged a complaint alleging unsanitary conditions at the clinic almost identical to the alleged conditions we have described. It was then that state health officials first declared they had no control over such matters. The complaint apparently was not investigated. The clinic denied the complaint, saying it had been made by a few unhappy former employees. In June of 1996, the clinic failed to report the theft of dangerous narcotics to the state. That is a violation of law. In this letter, the state health department said the clinic was not correctly licensed for drugs and a report of the theft was not made. But that corrective action was taken. The matter was closed. Paul Gates, WAFB 9 News.
WAFB 9 News repeatedly requested an interview with Delta Clinic's owner Leroy T. Brinkley. Mr. Brinkley has declined to comment. State health inspectors enter the Delta Women's Clinic this afternoon. Direct orders from none other than Governor Mike Foster declaring an emergency as a result of a WAFB News investigation. Good evening, I'm Donna Britt.
And I'm George Sells. After viewing the WAFB 9 News stories we've shown you this week on conditions inside Delta Women's Clinic, Governor Foster this morning issued a public health and safety emergency in Louisiana. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with the very latest. Julie.
Well, George, the governor's executive order here states that videotape obtained by WAFB TV Baton Rouge reveals the great likelihood that the Delta Women's Clinic located in Baton Rouge may be operating in such an unsanitary and medically deficient manner that the health and safety of the citizens of the state of Louisiana using that facility may be in danger. The order demands that the Department of Health and Hospitals send inspectors in to places like Delta that perform medical and health-related functions but are not being inspected right now. The governor said he believes these facilities ought to comply with the state sanitary code or be shut down, that the state ought to know who's watching the doctor.
It's hard to really have words for the reaction. It's a horrible sight. It's frightening.
Governor Foster says he was shocked at our WAFB 9 News series this week, giving an unprecedented look inside this Baton Rouge abortion clinic.
I was really very, very irritated with the bureaucratic response. We can't do anything from DHH. That aggravated me.
So the governor issued an executive order today, giving the state the right to regularly inspect all medical and health-related facilities operating in the state of Louisiana to ensure that such facilities are operating in accordance with appropriate health, safety, and sanitation standards.
It flies in the face of common sense that we can let something like that go on, and we can't do anything about it, yet we can go into barber shops and beauty shops and make sure that they're sanitary. That doesn't... At some place, common sense has to come into play.
The governor ordered DHH inspectors to go into Delta this afternoon.
We're here to do an inspection of the clinic. Mr. Anthony is also with us. Can I speak to the person in charge, please?
DHH performed a 20-minute sanitary inspection at a clinic that had been thoroughly cleaned since our cameras were inside.
We're not going to be satisfied with that. We're going to go back and make another unannounced inspection at some point in time.
The governor wants the Attorney General to investigate past activities at Delta.
Because obviously, I think, without question, it borders on criminal acts, what we see there. And just see if we can get something going immediately.
I was horrified by the story. To me, this is not an issue of pro-life or pro-choice. This is an issue of health.
Now, Attorney General Richard Ayoub has said that he will work in concert with East Baton Rouge District Attorney Doug Morrow to launch a criminal investigation into possible negligent injuries that could have occurred at Delta. DHH Secretary David Hood this afternoon sent out a letter to the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners. This letter is requesting, based on the pictures in our stories, that the board launch an investigation into the credentials of the two doctors performing there at Delta. That's Dr. James Whitmore and Dr. Eileen O'Neill.
Julie, I want to emphasize that it's been our understanding that since your first stories aired, there's been a big-time cleanup inside that clinic. But so as a result, were there any violations found today during the inspection?
George, the inspectors did cite two minor violations, not having a marked biohazardous sticker on their dumpster and not having a place to properly store clean clothing. Definitely a different clinic, though, than what we saw and showed you in our stories. But inspectors say they did expect that this first time.
How long can the governor's emergency executive order remain in effect?
George, the governor says until lawmakers this spring get a chance to draft legislation that will allow regular inspections of facilities like abortion clinics, and not only abortion clinics, but doctors' offices, other places that do medical procedures and aren't being inspected. The DHH says next week they will begin going into the other 11 abortion facilities around the state that have not been inspected thus far.
So it is statewide. Thanks very much, Julie Baxter. The high-ranking health official insisted last night the state cannot do health inspections at abortion clinics. Today, Governor Mike Foster says, oh, yes, you can. Good evening. I'm George Sells.
And I'm Donna Britt. A special WAFB 9 News investigation this week has changed the face of how Louisiana regulates abortion clinics. Governor Foster today declared a public health and safety emergency and ordered state health inspectors to go into any medical clinics or offices that have not been inspected in the past. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with the results of our 9 News investigation. Julie?
Donna, the governor's executive order drafted this morning says videotape obtained here on WAFB reveals the likelihood that Delta Women's Clinic may be so unsanitary that it is threatening the health and safety of women in Louisiana who use that facility. Because of that, the governor ordered the Attorney General to review our stories and launch a criminal investigation into Delta's past activities. And he ordered the first DHH inspection team to go into Delta today. The governor today signaled the beginning of a new era where Louisiana citizens will know who's watching the doctor.
It's a horrible sight. It's frightening. It's a frightening thing. You're to be commended for going to that trouble.
Well, I was horrified by the story.
A very risky procedure has become almost deadly in some cases here in Baton Rouge.
The conditions that were shown in the story were certainly deplorable, and we're not going to tolerate that in Louisiana.
This afternoon, the governor's emergency executive order sent a team of DHH officials into the Delta Women's Clinic for the first time. That after a WAFB 9 News investigation this week showed conditions inside the clinic that would not be accepted in any other surgical clinic regulated by the state. The DHH said abortion clinics were exempt from inspection.
These pictures depict unsanitary conditions. We as a health department don't have any authority to regulate that.
I was really very, very irritated with the bureaucratic response. We can't do anything from DHH. That aggravated me.
The governor's order now demands that the health department inspect clinics.
I'm glad that the executive order was issued because it certainly helps to close a big loophole in the law.
Secretary Hood today wrote a letter urging the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners to watch WAFB's investigative series and launch an investigation into Delta's two doctors, Dr. A. James Whitmore and Dr. Eileen White O'Neill.
It flies in the face of common sense that we can let something like that go on and we can't do anything about it, yet we can go into barber shops and beauty shops and make sure that they're sanitary. That doesn't... It's someplace common sense has to come into play.
To me, this is not an issue of pro-life or pro-choice. This is an issue of health.
Now, Attorney General Richard Ayoub did say today that he will work in concert with East Baton Rouge District Attorney Doug Morrow to launch a criminal investigation into possible criminal violations that may have occurred, such as negligent injuries at Delta.
So, Julie, what came out of today's ordered inspection at the Delta Clinic?
Well, inspectors there did find two minor violations. We did mention earlier, though, we knew that the clinic had cleaned up significantly since we had been inside and since our story had begun airing earlier this week. I noticed that just from the short time that I was inside the clinic today before they asked our cameras to leave. The health department did emphasize that they will have to check regularly in order to make these kind of inspections effective, Donna.
All right, and what is the duration of an emergency executive order like this?
This emergency executive order will stay in place until legislation is able to be drafted to make this a permanent condition. That's according to Governor Foster today. And the DHH says that next week they will begin, as part of this executive order, going into the other 11 abortion facilities that are across the state and doing inspections there.
Thank you, Julie Baxter.
Our stories about Delta Women's Clinic explored allegations made in a lawsuit that unsanitary conditions at the clinic led to a woman's health problems. Our own investigation produced pictures of the interior of the clinic that might raise questions concerning sanitary conditions. Governor Mike Foster called for an inspection of the clinic based on our reports. The clinic passed the inspection. Today, state abortion providers sued the governor to stop his plans to regulate or inspect abortion clinics in Louisiana in any way. This statement was issued in a press release concerning the lawsuit. We quote, "Make no mistake about it, this latest attack on abortion by the state of Louisiana is not about protecting women's health, but is intended to shut down abortion clinics. The governor's order is based on politics, not medicine." End of quote. But Governor Foster this afternoon denied that. He said our reports raised concerns about public health, and that's why he called in the Department of Health.
And then when I called DHH and they told me that they couldn't go in and inspect and make sure this was straightened out, I thought we had to do something. It had nothing to do with whether they were an abortion clinic or a tattoo parlor or, you know, didn't make any difference what it was. It was bad, and I was told that we didn't have the authority to do it. And I think, I agree with my lawyers, under the police powers of the state, we don't have to sit here and see public health operated in that fashion anywhere.
Governor Foster said it's a shame the clinics have chosen to fight rather than work with the state to ensure the safety of their patients, but that he will stand by his actions.
None of our citizens should have to go into a butcher shop like that seemed to be. It has nothing to...
And I'm George Sells. Governor Mike Foster, the state of Louisiana, and officials of the Department of Health and Hospitals all being sued this evening by those abortion clinics and abortion doctors operating here in Louisiana. WAFB's Paul Gates joins us now with details. Paul.
Well, George, it appears that history repeats itself. In the past, state efforts to regulate abortion clinics have been shot down. as having a chilling effect on a woman's legal right to that procedure. Governor Mike Foster's recent efforts to look for unsafe or unhealthful conditions in the unregulated abortion business are being attacked on the same grounds. It all started with an investigative series we aired here 2 weeks ago. Our stories about Delta Women's Clinic explored allegations made in a lawsuit that unsanitary conditions at the clinic led to a woman's health problems. Our own investigation produced pictures of the interior of the clinic that might raise questions concerning sanitary conditions. Governor Mike Foster called for an inspection of the clinic based on our reports. The clinic passed the inspection. Today, state abortion providers sued the governor to stop his plans to regulate or inspect abortion clinics in Louisiana in any way. This statement was issued in a press release concerning the lawsuit. We quote, "Make no mistake about it, this latest attack on abortion by the state of Louisiana is not about protecting women's health, but is intended to shut down abortion clinics. The governor's order is based on politics, not medicine." End of quote. But Governor Foster this afternoon denied that. He said our reports raised concerns about public health, and that's why he called in the Department of Health.
And then when I called DHH and they told me that they couldn't go in and inspect and make sure this was straightened out, I thought we had to do something. It had nothing to do with whether they were an abortion clinic or a tattoo parlor or, you know, didn't make any difference what it was. It was bad, and I was told that we didn't have the authority to do it. And I think I agree with my lawyers. Under the police powers of the state, we don't have to sit here and see public health operated in that fashion anywhere.
Governor Foster said it's a shame the clinics have chosen to fight rather than work with the state to ensure the safety of their patients, but that he will stand by his actions. Now, the recent inspection of the Delta Women's Clinic is the second time someone from the state has been there. September 23rd, a state sanitarian from the East Baton Rouge Parish Health Office went to the Delta Clinic based on a complaint of unsanitary conditions. In her report, the state inspector said, in conclusion, spoke with Laurie Durant about nature of complaints, which was found to be invalid at time of inspection. The worker who visited the Delta Women's Clinic was apparently unaware the state health department had a policy of not going into abortion clinics.
Paul, I understand another former employee of the clinic is speaking out now. Why is she coming forward now?
Apparently saw our reports here on Channel 9, and she contacted us tonight at 10 o'clock. Julie Baxter will speak with that woman. She recently worked at the Delta Women's Clinic, but she finally quit because of what she described as the way the clinic was being run. She also makes some allegations.
Hospitals after his order sending inspectors into the abortion clinics in the state. A recent series of WAFB9 News reports raised questions about sanitary conditions at Delta Women's Clinic in Baton Rouge. Following our reports, Governor Foster issued an executive order calling for inspections of abortion clinics, though in the past the clinics have gone unregulated and without inspections. In filing their lawsuit today, abortion providers say the governor's action is not about protecting women's health, but is intended to shut down the clinics. Governor Foster says that's not true. It was a health issue.
Then when I called DHH and they told me that they couldn't go in and inspect and make sure this was straightened out, I thought we had to do something. It had nothing to do with whether they were an abortion clinic or a tattoo parlor or, you know, didn't make any difference what it was. It was bad, and I was told that we didn't have the authority to do it. And I think I agree with my lawyers. Under the police powers of the state, we don't have to sit here and see public health operated in that fashion anywhere.
Governor Foster says he thinks his executive order will stand up to court scrutiny. He says it's a shame the abortion clinics have chosen to fight rather than work with the state to ensure the health and safety of their patients.
For the first time tonight, a former worker at Delta Women's Clinic has agreed to talk publicly about the conditions and practices she saw while she worked there. WAFB 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with her story. Julie.
Well, George, she asked that we not use her name on the air. She worked at Delta for 8 months, and she left several months ago. Part of her job was to clean instruments there at the clinic. She says she was concerned about whether the conditions were sterile and also about whether there may have been some violations of state law going on at the clinic.
If there were more than 8 patients to be done, there were not enough sets of instruments to go around. When they would come into the scrub room soiled, there would be time enough to wash them in hot soapy water and put them in the autoclave for just a few minutes, not long enough to be properly sterilized.
This ex-worker says Dr. James Whitmore told her these instruments were safe to use in women.
He said there just wasn't anything to be done. They just couldn't afford any more sets of instruments.
She was concerned about what she says was easy access to controlled drugs inside the clinic.
I remember one instance, a friend of one of the employees came in and she was nauseated. And the employee took her back into the bathroom and gave her an injection of Phenergan.
She says prescription Nubane and IV Valium were left out in the open, and she says employees could even order drugs themselves.
It happened upon one occasion that I know of, that I was there, that someone ordered drugs to come in who had no business ordering, the diet pills, amphetamines.
She says she saw one abortion performed past the legal time limit.
Past 22 weeks, yes I did. He performed an abortion, and when the fetus came back to the scrub room, everybody commented on the fact that it almost had its own personality by then. It was fully formed. It had features, you know, that you could, it was bad. It was bad.
This ex-worker says she tried to clean up conditions, but the last night she was there, she remembers Dr. Whitmore coming into the scrubbing room where she was cleaning instruments.
He came through the door open and came in and he said, "What seems to be the problem in here?" Something to that effect. And I said, "There's no problem." And he said, "You're being awful slow tonight." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, there's two ways to do this. There's a right way and a wrong way." I said, "Do you want it done the right way, or do you want it done the wrong way like it always has been done?" And he didn't like that. He just said, you know, "Get him out to me, get him out to me faster." Well, that evening I put my resignation in.
Now, we did go out to the clinic tonight and try to give Dr. Whitmore a chance to respond to these allegations. The clinic appeared to be closed tonight. Dr. Whitmore and Dr. O'Neill have repeatedly denied our request for an interview.
Julie, did this former worker, mention whether any kind of physical evidence as to whether the sanitary conditions there were affecting the patients at all?
Well, George, she mentioned several incidents to me. One particularly of note, she said that often women who went to Delta and got an abortion there would call either days or weeks after the procedure, and they would say that they felt like they had an infection. They would talk about having a foul odor, unusual bleeding, a high temperature, just some signs that may indicate an infection. But she said those women would often reach a voicemail box only and leave the messages there, and often those messages would not be returned. So she was very concerned about what happened to those women and what they were experiencing, yes.
Thank you, Julie Baxter on the Delta Women's Clinic in Baton Rouge.
Remember the
started everything.
WAFB 9 News has uncovered exclusive details.
Members of the Health and Welfare Committee took a look, some of them for the first time, at our report aired last month showing rusted surgical instruments and bloody floors inside one abortion clinic. These are some of the lawmakers that will decide on whether the state can do anything to prevent these kinds of conditions at clinics that for the last 2 decades have not been regularly inspected.
Anybody want to say anything? Not a pleasant picture.
Only 6 of the 17 members of the Health and Welfare Committee were there today to see our report as it was presented. That's not enough for a quorum. But in 3 weeks, this same committee will have to take up a bill that would treat abortion clinics just like outpatient surgical clinics. The proposal would mean regular inspections for sanitary conditions. Lawmakers today asked about Delta's doctors.
These are licensed physicians, right, Julie? Where's the medical board of examiners during all this?
Indicating there may be more legal fallout ahead from our report. Julie Baxter, WAFB 9 News.
To define just how far into a pregnancy a woman has a legal right to have an abortion. Now, the Supreme Court has already said that the state should determine a point of viability. That's the point after which a child can survive on its own outside the womb. Before that time, federal law says a woman is entitled to an abortion. Now, today, senators heard that Louisiana law has never defined exactly when that point of viability is. Senator Tom Green, backed by testimony from an LSU neonatologist, proposed that that point should be 22 weeks.
I can think of no reason that a pregnancy must be terminated after viability with the intent to take the life of the unborn child.
We're not going up against the Supreme Court. We're assuming the responsibility and charge the Supreme Court of the United States of America has given us to protect these babies that are viable outside the womb. That's the least we can do.
Now, what would happen under Green's proposal is that after 22 weeks, if a woman wants to end her pregnancy, she has to go to a hospital where doctors are to make every effort to save the life of the child as well as the life of the mother. Now, this same Senate panel watched a WAFB 9 news report depicting conditions inside a local Baton Rouge abortion clinic. The panel did vote to treat abortion clinics like outpatient surgical clinics, subjecting to the same type of inspections that outpatient surgical clinics have each year. So those two measures coming out of Senate panel today going to the Senate floor.
Abortion legislation that the committee took up today.
No, they did take up both of those issues. They passed both of those issues out, and the full Senate will take a look of that. Now, what's interesting here right now, Donna, is that on the Senate floor, a raging battle is continuing over gambling, and a senior senator, John Henkel, is up. After lawmakers had the chance to watch our WAFB 9 News series that showed questionable sanitary conditions in Delta Women's Clinic here in Baton Rouge. That was an investigation that was prompted after a Vermilion Parish woman was infected after an alleged botched abortion there and since sued the clinic. The governor is supporting this bill, but 4 lawmakers opposed it, 3 from New Orleans. One, though, was Kip Holden from Baton Rouge, who says he's afraid the Foster administration is out to get abortion clinics. Of the clinic?
Have no problems with inspections of the clinic, but I think based on the way this administration has dealt with those clinics so far, I believe that they are setting them up in one category versus how they handle other clinics, and everyone should be treated the same.
Now, this bill goes next to the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, and that is where the author of the bill, Representative Tony Perkins, says he expects more opposition. Donna.
Julie, it wasn't the only controversial bill up there today. I understand that families of the mentally ill were there today to fight for their loved ones.
Donna, they were there. Court decision in the 1970s send state health inspectors into abortion clinics across the state, and they would check those clinics just like they check other outpatient surgical clinics. Now, our 9 News story sparked, in fact, national interest when we showed conditions inside Delta Women's Clinic here in Baton Rouge. The way that the legislature and the governor have decided to respond to this is to treat abortion clinics under the law the same now as outpatient surgical clinics and have those regular inspections. That is expected to get final approval later tonight, and the governor...
Well, for the first time in Louisiana law, they'll be treated just like any other outpatient clinic. They will have to meet the same standards of sanitary conditions, the same type of equipment available, record keeping. It'll be a whole new ballgame for the abortion clinics because they're now going to have to operate like a true clinic.
The governor is expected to sign the bill. Meanwhile, among the new requirements are certain changes in the type of medical equipment abortion clinics use, as well as
local abortion clinic. The clinics will now have the same annual inspections that other outpatient surgical clinics have. In early February, 9 News uncovered unsanitary conditions inside the Delta Women's Clinic here in Baton Rouge. Once exposed, the governor immediately called for a public health emergency and demanded that something be done to ensure abortion clinics maintain the same sanitary conditions that other outpatient clinics are required to have. Last night, a 93-3 vote, House lawmakers gave the final stamp of approval. Also yesterday, lawmakers
holding abortion clinics are back to the way they were before. She and another Delta worker who also quit this week are particularly concerned about an April 1st procedure where a 38-year-old woman had to be driven to Baton Rouge General for an emergency hysterectomy after Dr. James Whitmore allegedly performed and perforated the woman's uterus, and also allegedly did not attend to her until some 3 hours after she had been lying in recovery, despite a nurse's repeated pleas.
Checked where I had left the clinic, and when I came back, there was blood everywhere in the recovery room. And I asked what happened, and they said that Doc had finally come out and checked on her, and they had put her back up on the table, and he was going to resuction. Well, we had her under ultrasound, and under ultrasound, you could see that the uterus had been perforated. There was a hole. He let the patient lay there and bleed. He'd press on her uterus, and she'd spit out blood clots as big as my head. And I'd gasp at him, and he'd say, "Get out. You can't stay in here. Just get out."
Now, the 2 women say the doctors did not call 911 to get help for the woman because he was afraid that 9 News would hear that call. A private ambulance company came, according to the 2 women, and with the patient's blood pressure bottomed out, they said that if they had arrived, the ambulance had arrived 5 minutes later. She may not have made it. Now, the women say the hoses that we showed you are still reused in the clinic. They say it has only 5 hoses right now. They say the tables that the women lay on are still rusted. They also say that they stalled health inspectors that day in February when they acted on the governor's emergency order to inspect the clinic.
Yes, whenever the health officials was there, we stalled them in the front waiting room so that we could hide some stuff. And the rusted instruments that were showed on the news was removed from the clinic.
What did you do with them?
I took them and disposed of them in the dumpster at the clinic.
Now, both the women say that when a worker asked to buy new equipment there enough to allow sterilization, the clinic owner, L.T. Brinkley, says that there just is no budget for that.
Julie, what about their comments about the new state law calling for the same sort of regulations that any other surgical clinic would have to own up to?
George, of course, that's held up in court right now as a group of clinics sue. They say that that law impedes a woman's right to an abortion. But the women I talked to today specifically told me that they believe that without that law, the clinic would continue to operate under conditions they describe as dirty and unsafe.
Okay, thank you, Julie. And this is a late-breaking story for us. We'll have much more detail on this on tonight's 10 o'clock news.
February still exists at the clinic. 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with the latest on the abortion clinic, Delta Women.
Well, Donna, today these 2 women you're about to meet went to the Attorney General's office and told them their story. The Attorney General's office is continuing an investigation into the clinic after the conditions we exposed there this spring sparked a new law allowing health inspections. One particular incident bothering these 2 women is an April 1st procedure where they say that Dr. James Whitmore perforated a woman's uterus and left her in that condition in the recovery room for more than 2 hours.
Well, I had left the clinic, and when I came back, there was blood everywhere in the recovery room. And I asked what happened.
She says workers there told her Dr. Whitmore had pressed on the woman's uterus to check for perforation.
She was screaming. I mean, literally screaming. He had somebody hold a gown over her mouth so other patients in the clinic would not hear her. Well, we had her under ultrasound, and under ultrasound you could see that the uterus had been perforated. There was a hole. He let the patient lay there and bleed. He'd press on her uterus and she'd spit out blood clots as big as my head.
Alleging all this happened under these same conditions we showed you in February, the women say the doctor didn't want to call 911 because he didn't want 9 News to hear the call. They say a private ambulance service rushed the woman to a local hospital.
We spoke with her mother the next day, and she had to have a complete hysterectomy done.
The former clinic administrator told us the day of this inspection that the governor demanded with an emergency order, clinic workers deliberately stalled health inspectors.
Whenever the health official was there, we stalled them in the front waiting room so that we could hide some stuff. And the rusted instruments that were showed on the news was removed from the clinic on that day. What did you do with them? I took them and disposed of them in the dumpster at the clinic.
And the workers who left this week confirmed previous workers' testimony that the owner says requests for new equipment just aren't in the budget.
He's only concerned about the money. His only concern is the money. All he's ever said to me was, I own this clinic and I never get any money out of it.
Now, those rusty instruments that you saw, the former administrator says she retrieved those from the dumpster and she delivered them today to the Attorney General's office as they continue their investigation. Meanwhile, the law that Governor Foster signed into effect allowing regular health inspections at abortion clinics is being held up right now from being enforced because of a suit from a group of clinics. The clinics say that this law impedes a woman's right to an abortion.
Julie, has there been any response, maybe over the last few months, from customers over at Delta?
Well, ex-workers are saying that, of course, on Wednesdays and Thursdays when Dr. Whitmore was in, when we first aired our stories, Delta was seeing about 30 to 40 operations a day. Now that has dropped down to about 15 between the 2 days. And on Saturdays when Dr. Eileen O'Neill comes in, It's about 20 to 25. That amount has dropped as well.
Thanks, Julie. Keep us posted on your investigation.
Well, state officials are...
The families of the mentally ill were there today to fight for their loved ones?
Donna, they were there.
Elections at Delta and their clinics. 9 News last night aired the claims of 2 former Delta Women's Clinic workers who left this week and claim conditions there are still the same as they were when 9 News first aired complaints back in December. 9 News reporter Julie Baxter joins us now with the latest on her investigation. Julie?
Well, Donna, we went out today to try to get a response from Dr. James Whitmore, the doctor who allegedly punctured a 38-year-old woman's uterus during an abortion procedure, a wound the workers say resulted in an emergency hysterectomy at a local hospital. Now, Whitmore didn't want to talk today. Dr. Whitmore, can we talk to you for a second?
How y'all doing?
Hey.
Nice weather, ain't it? Oh, that ain't.
An attorney for the patient involved in the April 1st incident has filed a petition for a medical review panel to investigate Dr. Whitmore's handling of that incident. Meanwhile, the state law passed last month in response to previous complaints that Delta is undergoing a legal challenge. A New York abortion rights center has sued the state, temporarily blocking a law to start regular sanitary inspections at the clinics, saying the increased costs for abortion services that would result would make these services inaccessible for many Louisiana women due to prohibitive expense, thereby placing an undue burden on the right to choose abortion in the state. In supporting testimony, Shreveport Clinic manager Robin Rothrock told the court for these women the effect of applying ambulatory surgical center regulations to abortion facilities will be to make safe and legal abortions inaccessible. But the former administrator says she favors the new law.
Because that way that the people that work inside the clinic would do the job they're supposed to do to keep it up to date and to keep it clean, and the owners would also make sure that it was that way.
Now today, attorneys representing that New York center and the clinic told state attorneys that they will file to block the law Governor Foster backed. Like his executive order that came down after our story, the law allows a health inspection when a complaint is filed about an abortion clinic. The clinics want the courts to block that law.
Okay, Julie, we're talking about a lot of legal things here. Where in the middle of all this, the legal challenges, where is the state health department now? Can they respond to a complaint like the one we've seen?
Donna, they told me this afternoon that, yes, they need a legitimate complaint to go in and inspect the clinic, but they feel like our 9 News story constitutes that type of complaint. But they're up against a time pressure, though. A New Orleans federal judge who has in the past ruled in favor of the clinics could block that law. And if DHH does not respond before that, if it does happen, then they will not be able to respond any longer legally.
Okay, a legal countdown of sorts. Thank you, Julie.
Well, convicted drug... That's because a New York abortion rights center is challenging Louisiana's new law, allowing health officials to inspect a clinic when there are complaints that conditions inside are unsafe. 9 News reporter Julie Baxter went to Delta Clinic today to try to get a doctor's response to the latest complaint.
Last night, we brought you the testimony of a 15-year administrator at Delta who left this week in disgust at conditions at the clinic. Of particular concern, an April 1st procedure that allegedly left a 38-year-old woman's uterus punctured.
Under ultrasound, you could see that the uterus had been perforated. There was a hole.
Dr. Whitmore, can we talk to you for a second?
How y'all doing?
Hey.
Nice weather, ain't it? Oh, that ain't.
Can we talk to you for a second?
Today, the doctor did not want to talk to us, but another battle, this one in the courts, could mean abortion clinics will return to being completely unregulated. Already, federal courts have temporarily blocked the new state law that allows for regular medical inspections of abortion clinics, saying it's just too expensive to maintain those conditions. A New York abortion rights center argued the increased costs for abortion services that would result would make these services inaccessible for many Louisiana women, placing an undue burden on the right to choose an abortion. And a Shreveport clinic manager argued that for these women, the effect of applying ambulatory surgical center regulations to abortion facilities will be to make safe and legal abortions inaccessible. But the Delta administrator who left this week says conditions at Delta prove clinics need the new law.
Because that way that the people that work inside the clinic would do the job they're supposed to do to keep it up to date and to keep it clean, and the owners would also make sure that it was that way.
Julie Baxter, WAFB 9 News.
Now, lawmakers have already been temporarily blocked by the courts. Now, the other new law allows a state inspection when there are complaints like this about clinics. Now, health officials say this complaint you've just seen demands a response from them. That response, however, could be halted if the department waits. And courts block that second law, as they have blocked the first.
Baxter joins us now with the very latest on this story. Julie?
Well, Donna, the Louisiana State Board of Medical Examiners took 3 years before it held a hearing some weeks back on Dr. A. James Whitmore. The doctor, the panel says, performed 20 to 30 abortions a day here in Baton Rouge at the Delta Women's Clinic. The case grew out of our 9 News story with Roxy Daniels, the woman jockey from South Louisiana, who was left bedridden for months after her operation at Delta Women's Clinic.
Roxy Daniels told us her story. 9 News went inside Delta Women's Clinic and found these instruments and allegations of other wrongdoing there that sparked the medical board's investigation and 2 new state laws. Although Dr. James Whitmore did not perform Roxy's operation, the medical board heard other testimony that found in one case he had let a patient bleed for more than 3 hours after an operation, telling nurses not to call an ambulance because of, quote, possible media involvement. That woman had to have a complete hysterectomy. The board found Whitmore guilty of unprofessional conduct and of failing to satisfy the prevailing medical practice standards in Louisiana. 6 former clinic workers were on hand to tell the board their experiences at Delta. The board says their investigation proved these instruments were, quote, rusty, cracked, and unsterile. The opinion also says Dr. Whitmore would use single-use hoses and cannulas on more than one patient, and that he did not appear disturbed about unsterile conditions, like not changing the sterilizing fluid enough and finding pieces of tissue floating in that solution. The board has placed Whitmore on probation, saying, quote, Dr. Whitmore's disregard of proper sanitary procedures, his rude and callous treatment of his patients, his refusal to answer their questions, and his tardy recognition of the seriousness of the condition of a patient endangering her life render him guilty.
Now, Dr. Whitmore no longer operates at Delta. This probation means that for 6 months he must have another approved doctor in the room when he performs any operation. Roxy Daniels' case is still in the court system tonight.
So, Julie, can we ask where we are with new state laws on this, and what about Roxy's case? Could that situation have been prevented?
Well, Donna, at first, if you remember, the health department at first told us that it didn't think it was legally allowed to go in and respond to complaints like hers. One new law that has passed says in emergency situations like that, they can go in, they can investigate. The other law passed to require sanitary conditions in abortion clinics was shot down in federal court, so a third law was passed just last year. Health department lawyers right now finishing up new rules for abortion clinics meant to keep them sanitary. Other states have upheld such rules as we're drawing up now in Louisiana.
Okay, thanks. WAFB's Julie Baxter.
Stay tuned for this one.
Okay, Ken, thank you. Abortion clinics in Louisiana are not licensed like other outpatient medical centers, but that could soon change. Safety and sanitation concerns at the Delta Women's Clinic helped to prompt a public hearing on this issue. The State Health Department proposes that abortion clinics be licensed and subject to surprise inspections. Other proposals say the clinics would be in compliance with the State Fire Marshal, the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Health and Hospitals. Clinics also would undergo annual inspections. At least one licensed physician would have to be on staff, and only physicians would be able to perform abortions. Also included in the standards are the specific requirements for pre- and post-operative care and procedures. Finally, facilities would have to meet strict policies on decontamination, disinfection, and sterilization.
Well, hopefully what this will mean for the patients of clinics is that they'll have a level of assuredness that when they need this type of service, that they want this type of service, that the clinic will meet the basic minimum standards for health and safety.
And the Department of Health and Hospitals says the draft of its rules and regulations includes input from both pro-choice and pro-life groups.
President Bush officially got the Department of Homeland Security up and running at a White House ceremony. The current Homeland Security Chief, Tom Ridge, has been selected to head the new department. ABC's Jeff Morrell reports.
A set of licensing requirements aimed at protecting women from permanent damage, but not all agree with the changes. WAFB's Jennifer Hale is here with more.
Donna, this stems directly from an investigation WAFB first brought you into unsanitary, dangerous conditions at Delta Women's Clinic back in 1999. Doctors were using the same set of medical equipment on different women without first sanitizing them. Patients were suffering the long-term consequences. Now, a new set of rules could prevent that from happening again. Right now, Louisiana abortion clinics like this are free from having to comply with any type of state health regulations. But that's about to change. The Department of Health and Hospitals is releasing the first draft of the new rules clinics will have to meet in order to perform abortions.
It's an invasive medical procedure, and we want to make sure that the women who seek these type of services have some guarantees that the services they're getting are safe.
DHH is first proposing all Louisiana clinics must be licensed in order to treat patients. To get that license, offices need CPR-certified staff, a Louisiana licensed physician, and nurses who are either RNs or LPNs. A patient must be fully awake and undergo a post-examination of her uterus before discharge. Specific sterilized equipment is required for every procedure, and clinics must keep patient records and medical histories on file for at least 10 years.
Medical providers keep patient records. It's how you treat patients. You know what their prior conditions were prior to treating them. It's their medical history, and it's an important component of assuring safe and proper medical care.
But abortion providers say they already guard their clients' health and safety. Deborah Paris of Delta Women's Clinic tells me the unannounced inspections threaten women's privacy. These rules are an attempt to make it more difficult to provide services. They'll raise prices, which will be passed on to the women. The state legislative health committees and Governor Foster must now sign off on these suggestions for them to become law. The legislature approved the right for the state to regulate abortion clinics back during the 2001 general session. The only real question now is what will those rules exactly say? DHH is gathering public comment on this proposed outline before it's presented to the joint legislative health and welfare committees for a final vote. That meeting could come at any time. Donna?
Thanks, WAFB's Jennifer Hale.
Well, the mother of that missing 12-year-old girl from Denham Springs